heroes who have made the ultimate sacrifice and to honor the prisoners of war who have still not come home.
Here now to tell us more is the executive director of Rolling Thunder, who helped with creating this run, Artie Muller. Artie, good morning to you. Tell us, this is a run that has grown considerably, and you are going to rev those engines today.
Good morning, yes.
So tell us all about it. Tell us how
we had a huge turnout again.
Well, where does that passion, I mean, it continues to grow. You're highlighting prisoners of war, folks missing in action, and hundreds of thousands of motorcycles descend on Washington, D.C. Why are so many so passionate about this?
Because they're good Americans and they care. These men and women have fought for the rights of all of us so that we can live free the way we do, and our government has a war, gets us involved, and they leave our men and women behind after a war.
Artie,
it's not only our country, there's many other countries that were left behind. Their people were left behind after the war ended that were fighting on our side.
Artie, you penned a letter this year to Rolling Thunder's web page talking about the environment we're in. Some people don't want to stand for the national anthem and some other issues. What is your message that you want the nation to hear today?
Well, I think anybody who don't want to stand for our national anthem should leave our country. And if these baseball, football players, and all the sports players, if they can't respect our country, they should be fined, and if they do it a couple of times, they should be fired. There's plenty of people out there, good Americans, who want to play ball, and if they can't respect our flag, our country, our national anthem, we don't need them.
Yeah, well, the ride is today, Rolling Thunder. I imagine there will be American flags everywhere. Everyone will be standing for that anthem. Just quickly before I let you go, how many people are coming out today for this ride?
Everybody stands for our national anthem. Everybody salutes our flag.
All right, Artie Muller, thank you very
much.
much.
People here today are the true Americans.
Yeah.
They are indeed.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Artie.
Thank you. Some 400,000 bikers expected today, and a gunny sergeant, Marine gunny sergeant, will stand at attention the entire run, several hours. Amazing. All right. President Trump now says things are going very well for a potential summit with North Korea. Could the historic meeting be back on track? We'll tell you. That's coming up.
That has been freed. Josh Holt, who was in Venezuela, he was in prison for 2 years.
I just want to welcome you to the Oval Office, welcome you to the White House. We've gone through a lot, more than most people could endure.
I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for you guys, for everything that you've done.
You may have seen this story. The LA Times headline read, the Border Patrol Union calls Trump's National Guard deployment a colossal waste.
The quotes were, in fact, taken out of context. President Trump gave us all the momentum we needed. It was the Obama holdovers that failed to follow through.
The president took a moment to talk about the ongoing talks with North Korea.
We're looking at June 12th in Singapore. That hasn't changed. It would be a great thing for North Korea.
This is the Bone Frog obstacle course. It's brought to us by none other than the Navy SEALs.
Of course, it's Memorial Day weekend.
Are we this morning? We had the 78th Army Band. They've been with us all morning long, and normally they're outside, and because it's pouring out, we have them in our studio, and it is just so beautiful to hear that sound.
Can I do it? Can I say Eddie's? Oh, only one person actually listened.
That's pretty normal for you, Pete.
It is. It's standard. You guys are fantastic. Thank you for being here all morning long. As I said, as a National Guardsman, I'm used to hanging around with guys in camouflage on Saturday mornings because that's when our drills were. So it's been a lot of fun spending the morning with them. They're out of Fort Dix, New Jersey, somewhere I've also spent a lot of time, and they've done an amazing job bringing patriotism to us this morning.
And I love you say they only speak when spoken to. I think we should all learn from that sometimes.
Well, I think our producers are also being like, stay quiet.
Yeah.
Show.
Yeah. And as you said, it is Memorial Day weekend, and it is about making that ultimate sacrifice. So many of our brave men and women who have made that sacrifice.
It sure is. You know, Ryan Manion, the sister of Lieutenant Travis Manion and the Travis Manion Foundation, on this show earlier, and, you know, she was saying we have to remember those like Travis who made the ultimate sacrifice, but also wants America to enjoy the weekend while remembering them. And we've had you send us some photos of your proud American. We have some of those now.
Yeah, this is Donna sends a photo, says, remembering and honoring her son, Marine Corps Captain Ryan Ian Ellie, killed in Afghanistan back in 2011.
In this from Marcia, her cousin Sergeant Brian Clark, who gave his life fighting in Vietnam in 1966.
And Janice sends this one of her great uncle, who died on board the USS Astoria, which sank during World War II. We remember him and all the servicemen and women who died for this country. Keep emailing us your Memorial Day tribute photos to friends@foxnews.com. We want to see the fallen heroes, also your Proud American pictures, hashtag Proud American. We sit here a little somberly today. We're celebrating. We're ready to be with family. It's a patriotic weekend, but you realize there's some that are not here with us. And we salute you.
And you know what? A reminder of the history of this country and all that we have been through. And because of their sacrifices, we are still the most powerful country in the world, and we still have our freedoms, and we're still fighting for those every single day. I mean, you look at the news going on this morning, the breaking news with North Korea and how the summit could still be going on. And, you know, history is such an important part of where we are today. We learn from it, but we also, as you said, are so grateful for the men and women that got us to where we are today.
Think about all those who poured blood into Korean soil during the Korean War, the forgotten war. And there's a reason why there's a DMZ still there, and why the communist Chinese are still backing the North Koreans, and why we're still backing the South Koreans, and why those historic meetings at the DMZ are something of history, and why it's not easy to get Kim Jong-un, a stooge of the Chinese, to the same table as the United States president. Well, somehow, after canceling the meeting and then having a meeting between those two, it looks like we're close to potentially still having that meeting on June 12th.
These are images and video coming in. It was breaking 2 nights ago, happened again on the DMZ. The president of South Korea right there meeting with Kim Jong-un, trying to get these talks going again, potentially the summit still on June 12th. The president saying the talks are going well in Singapore on June 12th. If you weren't paying attention yesterday, here's what the president had to say.
We're doing very well in terms of the summit with North Korea. As you know, there are meetings going on as we speak. And I think there's a lot of goodwill. I think people want to see if we can get the meeting and get something done. If we got that done, and if we can be successful in the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, a lot of people are working on it. It's moving along very nicely. So we're looking at June 12th in Singapore. That hasn't changed. And it's moving along pretty well. So we'll see what happens.
And, you know, one of the interesting developments in that meeting between Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in was that he reported that Kim Jong-un has a fixed will about this meeting taking place. That's significant. You know, Senator Lindsey Graham, though, Pete, you mentioned China. Senator Lindsey Graham on with Judge Jeanine last night talking about the role China could play.
John Kerry and Obama would crawl through glass to get a deal with the Ayatollah. Trump is not going to do that with North Korea. China pulled North Korea back. I think China thought this thing was getting out of hand. China believes that they can play Trump. I think North Korea believes they can play Trump. Here's what they're going to learn. They can't. There would be no nuclear North Korea without China's help. There will never be the end of this diplomatically without China's help. What China needs to understand, if you don't help us through diplomacy, the war will be in your backyard, not ours.
That's right.
And that's maybe the one thing that could impact China, because they want to be the dominant player in that region. But if it means war and if it means threatening war, they might back down a bit. But I think Lindsey Graham makes a good point there. If it's about ultimately making a bad deal, we're not willing to do that. And the president pulling out just a few days ago, making that clear, not just to North Korea, but to China and everyone else involved, saying we're going to get what we want out of this, and we're not going to just stand for something that we're not proud of, that a deal that we are not happy with in the end.
Yeah, and China's been concerned about a reunification of the Korean Peninsula, because then they've got a Western power right on their edge as well. There's also a refugee problem. So the rhetoric and the pressure on China not unrelated to what's happening in North Korea also. And again, June 12th, apparently still on. The planning, some of the Secret Service agents and others are going there as if it will happen. Doesn't mean it will, but ultimately could be the start of a meaningful process.
Look, the president says he wants this to happen. Kim Jong-un has made it clear he wants this to happen. What it's going to come down to is having the same understanding of what it means to denuclearize in that region and in North Korea. And they've got to be on the same page before they ultimately go to Singapore and meet face to face.
We shall see. There's also another headline we want to talk to you about today, and that is the LA Times headline, which said the Border Patrol Union calls Trump's National Guard deployment a colossal waste. Well, we talked to that Border Council president, Brandon Judd, a little earlier. Here's what he said about what he told them.
But the quotes were, in fact, taken out of context. What I was talking about is the deployment of our current Border Patrol resources, and if we were deploying those resources correctly, would we actually need the National Guard? This is not a President Trump issue. President Trump made that decision to send the National Guard, which was the right decision. President Trump gave us all the momentum we needed to do the job. It was the Obama holdovers that failed to follow through on the momentum that he gave us.
So 1,600 Guard troops have been deployed so far, another 750 likely coming in days. But Judd there sort of clarifying both his comments, but also saying we've got to get it right with the deployment and wants to see that managed better.
He's supported the deployment, as we talked about on this program. He talked to us about the caravan. Shortly thereafter, the president made the call because the border wasn't secure to send the National Guard down there. The question isn't whether that was the right call. The question is, how are these Guard guys being used? And as someone who's been deployed for state-level missions, also there can oftentimes be a disconnect between what's happening on the ground and the intention of what's supposed to happen and what's being briefed back to Washington, D.C. He's saying some of the metrics aren't quite what they need to be, and we need to use them properly in the right slots and not be so redundant. That's different than the National Guard's a disaster and they shouldn't be at the border.
Well, you remember Brandon Judd was on the show originally, and he brought all of what's going on the border to our attention. You could argue that he's the one that led to where we are now. He's someone that wants the very best for this nation. And what the main point of your interview, it was a great one, is, you got to read beyond the headline, because a lot of people are wanting to tell a story that fits their narrative. And he said it's far more important than that. You got to get it right.
And, interestingly, he said Obama holdovers. Now, to give that some context, just about a year and a half into President Obama's administration in 2010, right? He deployed a similar National Guard to the border. And Brandon told me in a telephone call that wasn't a part of that interview. He says, back then they got it right because the holdovers were President Bush holdovers and they knew how to do it correctly. And now when he says Obama holdovers now, he's talking about managers that don't know how to properly.
Because there was a very different view of enforcement during that administration than there is now, and it's enforcing the rule of law. You can see how that confusion, so maybe not even confusion, undermining could happen.
Right. Well, you send two people on the border to do the exact same job, and he said we've got to make it more efficient. We've got to make it more effective.
That's exactly right.
All right. It was a great interview. Always good to get his perspective, because he is now declaring states of emergency as subtropical storm Alberto picks up steam along the Gulf Coast. Residents preparing for the worst, filling sandbags as flooding poses the greatest threat. Alberto, the first storm to be named ahead of hurricane season, is expected to make a landfall overnight, so be careful if you are in those areas. And a heroic teacher visiting the school where he was shot right after his hospital release. Jason Seaman, shown here at Indiana's Noblesville West Middle School after receiving a call from President Trump praising his bravery. That is according to a local station. The 7th grade science teacher shot in his stomach, the hip and arm while tackling the student gunman, who is now in custody. 13-year-old Ella Whistler, seen right here, also shot, is in critical, but we are told stable condition. Seaman on Twitter calling her a, quote, tremendous young lady, encouraging people to donate to her page. You can go to her GoFundMe page. We'll have it on our website as well. A student also setting up a page for Seaman, raising money for his medical bill. So head to friends at foxnews.com to donate. Also, there's 2 U.S. Navy warships sailing near disputed islands in the South China Sea overnight. The USS Higgins, a guided missile destroyer accompanied by the USS Antietam, on what the Pentagon is calling a, quote, freedom of navigation operation. This comes after China deployed missiles and a nuclear-capable bomber there. And it looks like a bromance is brewing between former Trump employees Anthony Scaramucci and Corey Lewandowski.
Do you guys get along, you two? No, we both got fired. We get along great. Come on. Doesn't get better than that, baby.
So much. You know what it is? We're the FBLs, fired but loyal.
Fired but loyal. The duo poking fun at themselves on Waters World. You may remember Scaramucci lasting only 10 days as the White House communications director, and Lewandowski was fired months after being President Trump's 2016 campaign manager. At this point, you might as well just poke fun at yourself.
Fired but loyal.
Fired but loyal.
Yeah, but Lewandowski's actually back in the mix with Vice President Pence's pack, so he's sneaking back in a little
And
bit.
Scaramucci is doing just fine for himself.
Yep.
He's all over the map.
One thing that will make or break this meeting. Harry Kazianis is on deck on that.
Plus, this Purple Heart was stolen from one veteran's family months ago, but they just got it back thanks to a total stranger. The heartwarming story you have to hear, that's coming up.
In terms of the summit with North Korea, there's a lot of goodwill. I think people want to see if we can get the meeting and get something done. If we got that done, and if we can be successful in the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
President Trump still sounding optimistic about a potential summit with North Korea. We're getting reaction from Harry Kazianis, Director for Defense Studies at the Center for the National Interest. Good morning, Harry. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
What do you make of this incredible meeting just north of the DMZ, and what does it mean?
Well, the thing I'm concerned about here, Griff, is looking at the commentary from President Moon last night. He gave a press conference, discussing about everything that he had spoken about with Kim Jong-un. The thing that bothers me is Kim Jong-un once again declared that he was willing to denuclearize. The problem is there's no plan yet. If he is, offering to denuclearize in sort of an aspirational sort of way, 10, 20 years down the line, that's not going to work. And if that's all Kim Jong-un is offering, President Trump should not go to Singapore.
So what happens next? So here we have the administration sending people to Singapore for planning. This has been very unorthodox, but President Trump was able to get Kim Jong-un to the table, and now maybe back. What is the next step here?
Well, the president's done a great job thus far. I mean, you have to give him a lot of credit. We were on the brink of nuclear war, going back to November or December. But the thing that we need to do now is we have planning teams that are going to Singapore. They might already be there right now and potentially even working with the North Koreans. The thing I'm afraid of is when we tried to do this once before, the North Koreans didn't show up to the planning meeting. And that might already have taken place. We don't know. If that hasn't happened and we're still having a jam here, we don't know what the North Koreans are going to do. My solution's simple. Get Mike Pompeo on a plane, third time's a charm, send him back to Pyongyang, look Kim Jong-un in the eye and say, look, are you willing to denuclearize or not? If yes, tell me your plan. If the plan works, you send Trump to Singapore. If he says no, he's not willing to do it, Mike Pompeo shakes at Kim's hand and maximum pressure continues. That's it.
Harry, I want to ask you, the letter that President Trump sent to Kim Jong-un, the first of its kind ever between a president and a leader of North Korea. Is it your sense that that really played a role in this latest development?
I think it absolutely did, because it showed the president, just like he's always done, he keeps his word. If Kim Jong-un is going to make threats of a nuclear showdown, there's no way that President Trump could have gone to Singapore. He wants to make a deal. He knows what he needs to do. He needs to put a plan on the table to get rid of his nukes. If he won't do that, this is a done deal.
And quickly, because we're almost out of time, the critics, Nancy Pelosi and others, saying that this has just been a win for Kim.
No, that's fake news, to be honest with you. The president is working extremely hard on this. He's invested a lot of political capital. There's a lot of other things he could be doing right now, but he's trying to keep the country safe. And who cares what your affiliation is, Democrat or Republican? He's doing his best.
All right, Harry Kazianis, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks.
All right. Our next guest has a powerful message for everyone this Memorial Day weekend. Remember our fallen warriors. Navy SEAL Jocko Willink joins us live. That's coming up, and you don't want to miss it.
Some headlines happening this week. President Trump will honor fallen service members tomorrow, laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier before speaking at a Memorial Day service at Arlington National Cemetery. And the commander-in-chief then heading to Nashville on Tuesday, holding a campaign rally in support of Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn's Senate campaign. The Tennessee Republican is locked in a close race to replace retiring GOP Senator Bob Corker. And on Friday, former Attorney General Eric Holder will appear at a high-profile event in New Hampshire, fueling rumors of a possible 2020 presidential run. Pete, who's not running in 2020?
Everyone. All right, it's Memorial Day weekend, and our next guest has a Fox News op-ed, reminds us to never forget why we celebrate. He writes this in part, quote, "This Memorial Day, remember me the fallen warrior. Remember what I sacrificed so you can truly appreciate the incredible treasures you have. You have the joys of life, the joys that I gave up. It came from sacrifice, the supreme sacrifice. The author of that powerful message is here, former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, commander of SEAL Team 3 and author of The Way of the Warrior Kid, a fantastic kids book. I've got a little nugget to share on that in a second. But Jocko, as you join us this morning, add on to that. Why did you write that, and what does Memorial Day mean to you?
Well, one of the biggest parts I wanted to get across in that piece was to remind people that these warriors that we remember today, they weren't just warriors. They weren't just soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. They were also people. They were human beings. They were husbands and wives and sons and daughters. They had families. They had hopes and dreams. And so it's not just a character that you picture in a movie that's wearing a uniform. No, it's a real person, a person like you that sacrificed everything for us.
Do you feel like too many have forgotten that today? That ultimately it's about mattress sales and barbecues and not enough remembrance?
You know, I live in a very strong military town of San Diego, California, where there's a lot of Marines and a lot of sailors, and I think San Diego does a great job in remembering. But I just want to make sure that people remember that these servicemen that sacrificed themselves, they're people, and I think that's the most important thing from my perspective
That's
today.
a great point. Well, raising men who would put their lives on the line is something that parents do, and hopefully our culture and society reinforce. But we've seen an example recently, this 30-year-old who had to be evicted from his own house. Well, the New York Post wrote this op-ed saying, "Deadbeat son is a sign of America's failure to raise boys." That's the headline. Do you feel like, this is an absurd example of this 30-year-old who fought his own parents and stayed to live at home. But are we failing our sons by failing to teach them how to be men?
Well, I can tell you, I still work with the military, and the men that are out there, the young men in this generation, they're out there holding the line like our forefathers did. And so I don't think you can't look at the whole generation and say we've done something wrong. But at the same time, there's certainly some changes in our culture right now. And as you mentioned, that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, Way of the Warrior Kid, that series, because I think that young boys and girls, and it's written for both, they need to be told that it's okay to be strong, that it's okay to try and work to be smart, that hard work is gonna get you somewhere in life, and personal discipline goes a long way.
Well, Jocko, I got to tell you, I'm going to be selfish here for a second. You've affected my own life and my own 7-year-old boy after these segments, because he loved Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's a fun book, right? I said, he's got to be reading the other ones. So here's a picture, actually, of my oldest son, Gunnar, just this morning, devouring your book, Way of the Warrior Kid. He's not faking it. He's halfway through, and he's only had it for a couple of days. What is the key message you're trying to get to boys like Gunnar, who's 7 years old, to say, you don't need to be a wimpy, you need to be a warrior?
Yeah, I think, and that's for parents as well. If you raise your kids to be strong, if you raise your kids to be capable, they're going to have better lives. The more discipline they have in their personal life, the more freedom they're going to have as well. And that's the message I'm trying to put across to kids.
Absolutely. And a little bit different than the Wimpy Kid series?
Yeah, it's a little bit different than the Wimpy Kid series. I didn't want to be raising any Wimpy Kids in my house.
All right, I agree, Jocko. And we were supposed to do an obstacle course over here, but it's raining ferociously, so we might not get to. I have a feeling you would have executed it anyway. Is that fair?
Don't let that rain stop you, Pete.
I know.
I'm
trying. I'm trying, Jocko. I need your help through some reinforcements. Appreciate your time this morning. The book Way of a Warrior Kid is fantastic, and thank you for your message on this Memorial Day. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it. All right, coming up, apparently bashing President Trump runs in the family. Chelsea Clinton, in a brand new interview, now says the president, quote, degrades what it means to be an American. We'll bring you what she said, more of it next. Plus, the 78th Army Band is performing live in studio for our Memorial Day weekend edition this Sunday. Here they are with the U.S. Air Force song. Play us out.
to you.
Little Army song love at the end there. Thank you. The 78th Army Band out of Fort Dix, New Jersey, been playing for us all morning. Was wondering when they were going to get to the Army. They saved the best for the last.
I wish we had
Thanks,
them here
guys.
every morning. They have been absolutely fabulous. So
Yep.
a shout out to them. And of course, we are all honoring Memorial Day weekend. And we've asked you to send in photos of members of your family or friends that you love, that you've lost fighting for all of us and paid the ultimate sacrifice. So keep sending us those photos. These ones coming in, though, are Proud American, because, of course, we've got the Proud American campaign. Hashtag Proud American. This comes in from Victor, pictured with his son Derek, who just graduated from the Air Force boot camp.
I
Well
don't know who
done.
looks happier.
Way to go. And
Yeah.
Vicky sends this picture of her husband and son representing two generations of the Navy.
Go Navy.
Cool. Luana sends these, one of her father, who served in the Air Force for 22 years, and her grandson, Colton, who is serving now.
I love those generational photos.
Yeah.
Those
Well,
are just fabulous.
because a lot of these military families are generational. I mean, you served,
my
your
family.
parents did it, your family. I mean, and then some are brand new to it. Thank you all for your service to this country. Hashtag Proud American. Keep them coming in.
Yeah, keep saying this. And one who killed him, Kennedy, telling the Washington Post that he was disturbed by the evidence or lack thereof against Sirhan during his 1969 trial. Sirhan admitted to the shooting, but claimed he didn't remember pulling the trigger. Robert Kennedy was shot to death leaving a campaign event in L.A. while running for president. We all remember that. So that is some big news there. All right, well, hot lava threatening a geothermal power plant in Hawaii. Authorities say they've secured the property, but the area still remains dangerous. An additional 2,000 people have been ordered to evacuate as intensifying volcanic activity threatens more homes. So far, lava has destroyed 82 structures on the Big Island. Also, this prejudice is deeply rooted in America. That is the new message from Starbucks, the company releasing a preview of its bias training for staff. Watch.
The work will grow to reflect the realities of our abilities, ethnicities, gender identities and expressions, sexual identities, class, language, citizenship, political views, religious affiliations, and more.
Starbucks is now closing more than 8,000 stores on Tuesday afternoon to conduct the 4-hour training triggered by the arrest of 2 black men inside a Philadelphia store that happened last month. The coffee giant announcing it will now allow anyone inside of their stores, whether they are paying customers or not. So anyone can come in and use their bathroom. And an expecting couple making an unexpected discovery. Jeff and Carrie reuniting an Oregon woman with her late father's Purple Heart after it was stolen from her mother's home. The couple finding Daryl Terrence's medal in an old RV, connecting with his family on Facebook.
I appreciate it very much, and it really means a lot to our family.
That is amazing. The Korean War veteran died back in 2011. Jeff and Carrie say they're naming their baby boy after him when he is born later this summer in August. Wow, that is pretty powerful.
Neat story for sure.
Yeah.
You know, a neat guy right over there. Rick Reichmuth.
We're so good at tosses, Rick.
We don't have a camera to show our.
No, but you are right there.
If I look like this and you look this way, then it'll look like we're having a relate shot.
Rick, there's a lot of serious weather though going on in this country.
There's a lot. You know, one thing we haven't talked about at all is the heat, and the central part of the country is baking. Take a look at this today. 93 degrees for a high temperature in Fargo, 95 in Chicago, 96 in Kansas City. You get the idea. It's very hot. Tomorrow, same story. 95 again in Chicago. So be very careful if you're outside here. If you have any elderly friends or neighbors, check in on them also. Maybe they don't have the AC on just as much. Down across parts of the south, this is storms. One set of storms, another one up across parts of the northeast. Some water rescues going on this morning across parts of New Jersey. Very heavy rain in around parts of Pennsylvania. Obviously, this is Alberto, and this is the big thing that we're talking about. Kind of has split apart here. Very heavy rain to the eastern side of Florida, and then the center, or what is trying to become a center of the storm, is here across parts of the eastern Gulf. We might get some breaks of sunshine here across parts of Florida throughout the day today, but the storm's going to continue to pull towards the north, making a landfall sometime tomorrow across parts of the Florida Panhandle. Everybody getting a lot of rain eventually from this. Because of that, we'll watch very closely for a lot of flooding.
All right.
And it is flooding outside here too, Rick. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. Well, a story just caught our eye. Chelsea Clinton, of course, is been. I believe she has a book coming out, so she's been giving.
She has a
interviews.
kid book out that she's been
Is that what it
traveling
is?
around for.
She's got a kid book coming out. Well, she gave an interview to The Guardian, and a couple, as you can imagine, was asked by a friendly reporter about President Trump. And there's a couple nuggets of the former first daughter talking about the president. First is about when he may go to the UK. President Trump may go to the UK in July to visit that country. This is what Chelsea Clinton said about that visit. She said, quote, "If I lived in Britain, I would show up to protest because I don't agree with what he's doing to denigrate what it means to be an American." So
that's what you want to hear on Memorial Weekend.
Well, protesting your own country in someone else's country, it's like when they didn't stand for the anthem, remember, in London for those games. It's even worse in that sense. Listen, she's got the right to protest all she wants. I just don't like that optic.
Well, that was just some of it. The interview goes on, and she talks more about hate, Griff.
Yeah, you know, she says in this interview with The Guardian that that this administration has not only mainstreamed hate, but mainlined it, which is really quite strong language. Actually, if we can just put that quote up, I believe we've got it. There you go. "Now I've come to feel differently because I think that the way that our president and many people around him have not only mainstreamed hate, but mainlined it, it is so deeply dangerous." Those are perhaps the harshest words that have come out of Chelsea Clinton's mouth.
She also
with
has
regards
some
to this administration.
Before we get to the Ivanka thing, because that's there too, it's the impugning of the motives of the other. Like, I'm a conservative. I don't agree with a lot of liberals on a lot of things, but it doesn't mean I think their heart's bad or they're evil people. You know, she's assuming that because President Trump pursues different policies, they're motivated by hate.
Yeah.
They could be motivated by the rule of law, a lot of other things that we've been missing for a while.
Yeah, so you mentioned she talks about Ivanka Trump, who they were friends, by the way, before this election happened in 2016. Here's what she says about Ivanka. She says, "She's an adult. She can make the choices for herself. I mean, she's 36. We are responsible for our choices. In 2008, I was really proud to support my mom, but I disagreed with her fundamentally on a few things, particularly her then opposition to equal marriage rights. For LGBT Americans, I never defended that position because it wasn't what I believed was the right thing to do." Basically saying Ivanka is complicit with whatever her dad does, whatever her dad says. Sort of a hit on Ivanka Trump.
It's interesting, you know, to hear this really for the first time. This is just sort of coming out, this story. For reporters who cover politics like myself, you wonder, is she gearing up for a political run? Because this is really strong rhetoric. I mean, this is not something that is going to be ignored in any corner, whether you're Republican or Democrat. This is a vicious ad hominem attack. And if it's not preceding a run for Congress, it's really quite puzzling as to what was the motivation here.
It is interesting because she does take that moment when she's talking about Ivanka, Pete, to separate herself on issues like gay rights, where she says, you know, I am different than Hillary Clinton, my mom, and former President Barack Obama when they weren't originally supportive of gay marriage and LGBT rights and those sorts of things. She said, I've always been an advocate for that. So it does highlight, if she is going to run for office, she's trying to get her point across. But just, it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of Americans when you have people like that have been in politics go across the pond and say such judgmental things about people who are currently in office.
Well, which means she knows better, right? She knows what she's saying. She's been in a tough spot under public scrutiny her entire life.
She talks about that.
And she talks about that, and that's very real. But, okay, take her mom's position in 2008. Would she have described her mom's position as hateful of lesbians and gays? Or did her mom just take a position she disagreed with? Again, impugning the motives of your opposition. Just because Donald Trump has different views on immigration doesn't make him hateful, but yet they throw that label out there loosely. And it is an unfortunate
and
part of our
racism and
political
all
discourse.
those things. You've got to be so careful.
All of those things.
Yeah, so she also says freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences, to which you could say, well, elections do have consequences. And that's ultimately what happened. People went to the voting booth and said, you know, they support a lot of things that President Trump was campaigning on.
Well, and you have the freedom to let us know what you think about that. Email us at friends@foxnews.com.
Could be some headlines coming out of that interview.
All right, coming up on the show, the media overwhelmed by the back and forth over President Trump's potential summit with North Korea.
There you go.
Whether the summit happens or not, has the media